So in the year of our Lord 2026, filmmaking has been around for roughly 130 to 140 something years. And in that time, it has gone through a variety of phases. Way back in the 1920s and 30s, films were mainly silent and in black and white. This era served as the early years in which the craft was still finding its place in the world. Fast forward to the 1940s and 50s, and filmmakers were establishing the baseline rules of what filmmaking techniques, as well as the business itself, would entail. Then in the late 60s, we saw the start of the American New Wave, which was an era of film that showcased the early years of many young, and at the time, amateur directors, who would start off as the new kids in town that weren't afraid to break the traditional rules of filmmaking. Definitely a risky thing to do as a newbie, but these same people would go on to be household names because of their desire to not just push the agenda, but to crumple it up and throw it in the trash. With some of them being directors like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, Stanley Kubrick, and of course, Steven Spielberg. The 70s and 80s was an era that was dominated by horror films, a genre that would become bloodier and edgier than ever before. Then from the 90s to the 2000s, it was all comedy movies, the best years of a genre that has seemingly been lost to time. From the 2010s to the present, filmmaking is bigger and more expensive than ever. It's becoming exceedingly rare that we see a movie that tells a traditional beginning, middle, and end. Nowadays, many films get sequels and spin-offs, but with the boost in productions comes the boost of individual artistic endeavors, as people from all over the country, nay, all over the world, travel to Hollywood to tell their stories. Sometimes their stories are fun and lighthearted, but other stories have a much deeper meaning. Some stories aren't just looking to give people an excuse to turn off their brain for 2 hours. These stories want us to think. They want to challenge us, what we believe. They want us to wonder if maybe it's not just the fictional world of the film that needs to change, but maybe it's the real world that needs to change too. There's a word for these kinds of movies, a word that's directed at movies that specifically make some kind of political statement or engage in social commentary. And that word is woke. A word that I fucking hate. If there is one of many things that I cannot stand about the current state of the world, it is that every time a movie comes out and it has a political message that aligns with, I guess, liberal beliefs, then people have to call it woke. So today we're going to talk about not only why this term is overused, but why movies have technically always been woke. But first, let's start off with the definition of the word woke. What does it actually mean? Well, the word woke in this context started being used all the way back in the 1930s. It originated from black culture and was used to encourage people to simply remain aware of societal injustices like racial discrimination and prejudice. But nearly 100 years later, it has an entirely different meaning. Nowadays, woke is mainly used by Republicans and conservatives to refer to someone or something that exhibits beliefs that align with the Democratic Party or liberals.
Thankfully, President Trump understands this and has moved to end these abuses. He called out Harvard for being a factory of woke ideology and a breeding ground for anti-American radicals.
Being woke means never having to say you're sorry.
Woke means never letting anyone say they're sorry.
Woke is racist.
Some key issues often presented as being woke are issues like women's rights, LGBTQIA rights, racism, and environmental issues. But in this context, being deemed as woke is considered to be a bad thing, because I guess caring about things just isn't what all the cool kids are doing anymore. Woke is now being used as a word that sends a message of distrust. 9 times out of 10, whenever someone calls a person woke, they are diminishing that person's compassion. Nowadays, being deemed as woke is to be deemed as someone who prioritizes feelings and emotions over logic and cold hard reasoning, ultimately labeling someone as an unreliable source. This fits into the world of film because when someone calls a movie woke, they are essentially invalidating everything that the film has to say. Interestingly enough, a common misconception about movies is that they only recently started having political and societal critiques. But what a lot of people may not realize is that films and storytelling in general have always kind of been woke. It didn't start with casting Halle Bailey as Ariel for Disney's live-action remake of The Little Mermaid, nor did it start with having the message of James Gunn's Superman be, "Don't be a dick." Sometimes it's subtle.
How can you talk if you haven't got a brain?
I don't know. But some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
Yes, I guess you're right.
And sometimes it's not so subtle.
Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us.
I also love seeing people do the craziest, most jaw-dropping, most gravity-defying mental gymnastics ever to convince themselves and others that political messages have ruined the movie-watching experience, specifically with movies like Star Wars. And if you truly don't believe that Star Wars is woke by now, then you are lost. You are lost, my guy. I mean, I could make an entirely separate video about how Star Wars is one of, if not the single most woke franchise of all time. And the only reason I haven't already done that is because, in all honesty, I wouldn't even know where to start. Seriously, which film, which scene could I possibly use to prove that those movies are political?
Every single one of them.
With the franchise's consistent use of strong female characters, actors who are people of color, the political structures of the different worlds, the fact that the Empire is comprised almost entirely of human soldiers, even though there's literally aliens everywhere, and for Christ's sakes, the villains are called stormtroopers, who also constantly go around asking for people's identification.
Let me see your identification.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
This franchise literally could not be more political if it tried to. And it's not just Star Wars. Political and societal messages can be found across every genre of film, even in the places where you'd least expect. Especially in the places that you'd least expect, like the horror genre, more specifically in the Stanley Kubrick film, The Shining. On the surface, The Shining is a horror film about a family moving into a haunted hotel for the winter. But as I'm sure many people know, The Shining is much deeper than that, because it delves into themes and ideas that would be considered woke, at least by today's standards. One of the key elements of the film is how the character, Wendy, is constantly making excuses for the behavior of her husband, Jack. The film explores how, much like many other women, Wendy is both psychologically and physically trapped in an abusive relationship with no visible way out. Mind you, that's just one element of the film. The Shining tackles other societal issues like racism, alcoholism, and the seemingly unbreakable cycles of violence. It has often been interpreted that The Shining as a whole is just one big metaphor for the darker side of human nature. Really, what The Shining is doing, along with basically all other woke movies, is that it is bringing attention to real-world issues in a way that audiences are able to digest easily, which is important. As much as I hate it when a movie is labeled as being woke, I do also believe that even if the message conveyed is 100% in the right, if it's conveyed incorrectly, it can come across as preachy or even a bit pretentious. But why do people think that woke is bad? Why do people believe that wokeness has ruined movies? Well, mainly it's because people see films as an escape from the real world, an opportunity for us to get away from all the noise for a few hours. So watching a film with a political message may leave audiences with a sour taste in their mouth. Which I can understand, but the problem is that for many people, who usually don't have much emotional regulation, there simply is no wiggle room. Woke equals bad, no exceptions. Little do they know that half the time what they deem as woke is what gives the movie character. Think about this for a second. Would Star Wars be anywhere near as interesting as it is without its philosophical and even some of its political themes? Really, without that, what makes it different from all the other sci-fi and fantasy movies that exist? What would be memorable about characters like the Punisher if he wasn't someone whose entire existence revolves around defying authority? Who is Katniss Everdeen if not a symbol for rebelling against your government? Would the boys be as cool as they are if they weren't fighting against an evil corporation? Would Indiana Jones be as cool if he wasn't always beating up actual Nazis? You see what I'm saying here? These are the things that make the movies and characters that we love so much. And because it's considered woke, it's automatically a bad thing. But let's just be candid for a minute here. The truth about woke is that what was once a term that encouraged self-awareness, it is now just a stupid buzzword that ignorant people hide behind when they're losing in a debate or just have nothing else of substance to say. If you're gonna call someone woke, then you may as well just call them, I don't know, a duty head. It's just as lethal and is basically at the same level of maturity. In any case, stop calling movies woke like it's a bad thing. It says nothing about your alleged intelligence, and it isn't a legitimate critique on a movie. All it shows is that your dumbass opinions are just a big, fat joke. 'Cause remember, a movie's a movie, no matter how woke.
This is Ripley, last survivor of the Nostromo. Signing off.
But anyways guys, thank you all so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, then be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you're notified every time I upload a new video. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and leave me a comment letting me know what you want to see next. But other than that guys, thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.